Hey, this is Scott at Fire Breathing Christian, and if there's one thing we ought to know by now about NPCs, if there's one thing we should realize about the social justice warrior NPC movement, it's that these people hate democracy. Each and every time it doesn't go their way, each and every time a vote doesn't go their way, they actively strive to undermine the whole concept and process. And we're seeing that again now in Britain, and I want to touch on that, but I think it's important to note that this is who these people are. It's no coincidence that they love to wear the Guevara t-shirts and they love to champion all sorts of openly Marxist, communist sources oftentimes, and that those people, those institutions that once dominated places like the Soviet Union, back when that system existed, they're not exactly known for, not big fans of democracy, of giving people the voice. And that basic core Marxist concept of control over people, rather than allowing them to voice themselves and choose the path forward for themselves as a culture, this is a basic component of NPC thought. This is what the NPC is. It's a programmed advocate drone, a drone that it regurgitates lines given to it from on high. So an NPC is not prone towards really understanding, much less appreciating or advocating real democratic processes. And so what we're seeing happening here in the United States with the constant impugning of the United States presidential election as sort of the result of Russian bot interference or election hacking, now we're seeing that same attitude unfold in England with regard to Brexit and the way that that's being held up by the NPCs. And all along the way, of course, they claim to have this high regard and desire for the people to have a voice, the people to express themselves. But when the people express themselves in a way that they don't like, well, no, that doesn't count at all. At all. And this harkens back to in the 2016 campaign in America, Hillary Clinton tried to score a lot of points on Donald Trump because Donald Trump would not commit to honoring the results of the election automatically in this comprehensive blanket sense. And Hillary portrayed or attempted to portray Donald Trump as some sort of dark, evil force who's just fundamentally incompatible with American ideals and virtues, the virtues of the West, democratic principles. He was an enemy of those things. He was a monster. And then, when she didn't win, what happened? She actually played the role of the monster that she accused Trump of being. And it's the same way now. We're seeing the Brexit vote happened. Brexit passed miraculously and through the serious blood, sweat, and tears of a whole lot of people who fought very hard so that they could participate and fight for what they believed in what was put forward to them as a democratic process that would be honored. Now we see basically an attempt on the part of NPCs and definitely the NPC media in England trying to nullify the whole thing and call for a do-over. No joke. This is now what they're down to. As they're getting close to Brexit happening in some form or fashion, now hundreds of thousands of NPC drones have been summoned into the streets to clamor for a do-over vote because, democracy. Yeah, seriously, this is what they're saying. The people's voice again, because the fact that they lost this significant vote, a hard-fought battle, no. In NPC land, these things only count when they win, when they conform to their narrative. And it's the same way if you've had a discussion with an NPC one-on-one. Their attitude is if you don't agree with them, you don't really understand them. And so your argument doesn't count as an actual argument. It doesn't matter how many points you bring up. They're not going to deal with any of the points, any of the details. They have a narrative, and when you don't conform with their narrative, their imagined reality, well then, in their minds, you're not real. You're not legitimate. And that's how they view things like Brexit. It doesn't really count because they didn't win. So what you have now is, in America, you have Hillary heading up the resistance movement after trying to make a big deal of how, Americans are supposed to go along with the results of a presidential election. And now what we have in England is the NPC media and millions probably, and certainly hundreds of thousands of NPC drones, programmed social justice warriors, taking to the streets to basically mount what amounts to a resist democracy movement. Democracy doesn't count until we win. We're going to have do-overs until we get the result we want. That's how NPCs, how cultural Marxists approach democracy and everything else. So we're going to go through this article here at The Independent that sums up part of it, The Independent being one of the NPC media sources that's encouraging this nightmare. So here's the article from NPC Media, The Independent. A historic moment 670,000 march to demand final say on Brexit at second biggest demonstration in a century. See, final say, that's the way you put it. You legitimize it. You say, oh, the final say. No, the final say is at the election, on election day, when this was decided, that was the say. You don't get to have a final say. And if you do, then we all know what that means. If this final say doesn't go your way, NPCs, we know that then what's it time for? A final say. And if that one doesn't work out, well, then it's a final say, because democracy isn't real unless it conforms to the NPC narrative. That's why the NPC worldview and mindset is fundamentally incompatible with anything, any good version of democracy you might have percolating in your head as you think about these things. The NPCs are fundamentally opposed to that. Understand, even though they use the word and they use phrases like the people's voice, all massive communist movements and massive statist takeovers, they're advanced under those sorts of banners. The people this, the people that, for the people. No, ultimately what they want is power by any means necessary. The article continues. The crowd stretched so far back that plenty of people never even made it into the rally. Masses overflowed through the streets of London for more than a mile, from Hyde Park Corner to Parliament Square, as an estimated 670,000 protesters took their demand for a fresh Brexit referendum right to Theresa May's doorstep. And again, look at the language that's used here. Fresh Brexit referendum. Protesters took their demand. You know, they're not acknowledging that democracy can't function this way. This is not, you can't just have redo when you lose. You can't do that. And one of the things, and they know that this is true, whether they get this or not, the fact that Brexit isn't actually happening, even though it was voted for, is incredibly discouraging to all those millions of people who really went out on a line and fought hard to eke out a profound, globe-rocking victory. And now they're down to this. Now they're saying, you mean these people want another election? And so I think the NPCs obviously realize that if they actually got this thing, a redo vote, there's such demoralization now on the pro-Brexit side, because they pour all their heart, all their blood, sweat, and tears into winning that victory, and it doesn't even seem to matter. So why would they do it again? NPCs know this, and so that's why we're getting this push. The article continues. They came from every corner of the UK in what is believed to be the largest demonstration since the Iraq War March in 2003, when more than 1 million people turned out in the capital to oppose the conflict. Amid the swaths of EU flags and banners, there was also a growing sense that campaigners, MPs, and activists were realizing, perhaps for the first time, that this was a battle that could be won. Interesting. Battle that could be won. How exactly? I mean, because you have to presume that the earlier battle, the actual election, didn't count. So you think this idea of fundamentally undermining, and now keep in mind, these are the same people who are always harping about election interference by Russian bots. And yet here you have 670,000 NPC bots openly interfering with an election and advocating that as like policy, the norm. When we don't win, we get a do-over. That's election interference. Naked election interference in your face, right there. And they're all for it. So once again, we see the hypocrisy, the stupidity. This is what NPCs do, and it is comedic, it is entertaining, and at the same time, it's very serious. I mean, we're seeing a serious tragedy unfolding here in Britain, and we have to hope that the right people will get a grip on things and get a handle, recognize the problem for what it is, and deal with it appropriately before it's too late, which is why we need to be paying attention to these things. The article continues, quote, "We were the few and now we are the many," end quote. Tory MP Anna Soubry told the crowds crammed into Parliament Square, quote, "We are winning the argument, and we are winning the argument most importantly against those who voted leave," end quote. Again, the election's over. They're having arguments now with people that they lost to, and they're rehashing these battles, and they think they should just get to do it over again. The election is over. And look, the one thing that you transmit through this approach is that elections don't matter. they don't really matter. You are not a respecter of these processes. You don't, and what you're telling people who voted for Brexit and seem to be destined not to get it one way or another is that democracy is a farce in England, and that if they want to see something happen, they have to go by other means to get there. And that's a very dangerous thing, a dangerous message to send. It's a basic necessity in any system that's claiming to be democratic. And again, there are a lot of ways in which we can explore that concept and how much of this whole system is a farce to begin with. But if we just run with the idea that it's a democratic system and that that's legit and real and people really do have a voice, well, when you take this approach, you blow that up completely. And so that's what the NPCs, whether they realize it here or not, they're destroying, their own claims to democracy, to any kind of regard for a democratic process, and they're doing real harm to the concept and the system itself, whatever it actually is, the system that calls itself democracy in the United Kingdom. They're just taking a sledgehammer to the foundations of that system with this approach. But they don't care, because ultimately, as we've said many, many times, NPCs are all about power at any cost. There's no logical consistency or honor or virtue necessary. Whatever it takes to win, to impose their will on others, is fine, is legit. The article continues. She said, "We will not walk away. We will take responsibility and sort out this mess with a people's vote." A people's vote. So the other people's vote, what about that? What about the actual people's vote that happened? What is that? Apparently, it just counts for nothing. And yet, the next people's vote will matter. Well, we all know, again, it'll matter if they win to them. Then it's legit. Otherwise, it's totally not. These people are crazy. The article continues. Speaking to The Independent beforehand, she said many Tory MPs were privately supportive of a second referendum amid bitter divisions in the party. Liberal Democrat MP Lila Moran said the sheer scale of the event showed that, quote, confidence is growing, end quote, in the fight for a fresh vote. Two huge cheers. London Mayor Sadiq Khan said the march marked a, quote, historic moment in our democracy. Yeah, it's historic in that you've openly abandoned democracy while claiming to love democracy. That's what this is. He continued. He told protesters, quote, we've heard some complain that a public vote would be undemocratic and unpatriotic, but the opposite is true. Again, it's just whatever you want it to mean. Whatever you want democracy to mean, whatever you want patriotism, consistency, logic, order, these people just make it up on the fly, and they're doing it again. This should not surprise anyone, but NPCs are advocating openly in London right now, in England, throughout the United Kingdom, a resist democracy movement. That's what they are. That's really the hashtag that they ought to be affixed to. Resist democracy, ... unless it conforms to our narrative. Because that's what they really are. That's their worldview. And this makes them just garden variety Marxists from way back who are just all about getting power any way they can and denying the legitimacy of anything that gets in their way. That's who they are. If you appreciated this video and you want to support what we're doing, please like the video, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit the little bell icon so that you can be notified every time we post a new video, which we're hoping to do regularly on a daily basis from here on out on this subject and related subjects. Thank you very much for your support. Without it, we can't continue to do this.